Welcome to Suburban Warrior, the podcast that will impact, inspire, and empower you to transform your mindset and become the badass warrior that you are. I'm your host and fellow warrior, Crissy Pfeiffer, former clinician and corporate marketing exec turned multi-passionate entrepreneur, performance and life coach, and mom to 4 not-so-little warriors. Each week, I will bring you honest conversations with inspiring guests to share their stories of resilience, optimism, success, and simple yet effective strategies so that you transform your thoughts and change your behavior to get the results you want in your life. You will be empowered to take action, warrior up, and believe in you. Let's do this. What's up, warriors? Welcome back to another episode of the Suburban Warrior Podcast. I am your host, Crissy Pfeiffer, and I am here today with an amazing suburban warrior here to share her expertise and story with you. And guys, this episode is going to be so good. It's going to be jam-packed, so much amazing information that I know that you're all craving, because I know that I try to find really amazing women that have the expertise to talk about menopause, menopausal care, healthcare, functional medicine, like what we can do to really help ourselves, advocate for ourselves, and become the healthiest selves we can be and live our best lives at this time in our lives. So my guest today is going to help us do just that. Today, I have Dr. Wendie Trubow. She is a certified practitioner. She is passionate about helping women optimize their health and lives as a functional medicine gynecologist. Through her struggles with mold and metal toxicity, celiac disease, and other health issues, Wendie Trubow has developed a deep sense of compassion and expertise for what her patients are facing. She is the co-author of Dirty Girl, Ditch the Toxins, Look Great, and Feel Freaking Amazing, and has been regularly featured in Mind, Body, Green, and Huffington Post. She is an accomplished speaker and previously had her own television show. She is on the faculty at A4M and a speaker for their conferences, along with other national societies. She and her partner will be releasing their next book in mid-2024. Welcome to the podcast, Wendie. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you, Crissy. Me too. It's great to be here.
So, like I said in the intro, I think that so much of what we're going to talk about today is really such a hot topic with women, really ages 35 to 55 who are experiencing new symptoms, having health issues, and really just struggling to find answers as to what's going on with their bodies. And it sounds like you had your own health journey as well. So why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Do you want the professional or the personal? Just so
I can
tell both, but
I want both, but I really want the personal, because I think, that's really the deep into like what we're all experiencing. But then I'd love to hear the professional too.
Let me get the professional out of the way, just so that, because it's like, I think that's kind of boring, honestly. So I went to med school. I graduated from Tufts Med School with an MD, MBA in 2000. I went into OBGYN, became a board certified OBGYN, and then really saw for myself actually, it's really cool. When I was pregnant with my third child, I had this moment where I already knew about functional medicine, and I'll tell about that in my personal part. And I had this moment where I woke up and I went, okay, I got to leave my job. It no longer represents who I want to be in the world.
Wow.
And I didn't know I was pregnant. So I had this epiphany over the weekend. It was Thanksgiving. I told all my high school friends that I was quitting my job on Monday, went in on Monday, quit my job. It's a 3-month out in medicine because you take insurance, you have to give 3 months notice.
Yeah.
And Tuesday I found out I was pregnant with my third child, and I was leaving my paid job with cushy benefits for my unpaid job with no benefits. And I was like, what have I done?
What is going on? And by the way, that's definitely not boring. I mean, that's pretty amazing, that journey. But yeah, I get that. That's scary.
Yeah. So I jumped and I went into functional medicine in 2009, and I've been in it for 14 years. Okay. So it's everything I could have asked for and more. So that's the professional stuff. But I got into functional medicine because I was so physically messy myself. Like I look like I got it all going on, except inside I was a hot flippin' mess. Yeah. So I didn't know until I was in my 30s that I had terrible genes, Crissy, like the worst genes. I should never have reproduced. My parents should never have reproduced.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, like really. So I have 2 copies of the MTHFR gene. I have 2 copies of the celiac gene. I have 2 copies of the vitamin D deficiency gene. And then, like sprinkles on ice cream, I have all kinds of other mutations, but only 1 copy.
Wow.
Okay. So I didn't know any of this. And in my 20s, I had just really irritable bowel, but it wasn't a thing. Okay. Irritable bowel wasn't like a thing that people talked about. I'm 52 and a half. So like nobody talked about that stuff. Right.
Yeah. No, not at all.
No, I had the worst gas, Crissy, like room clearing gas. I can't believe I actually ever got married because like who wanted to be in the same room with me? So I had irritable bowel and I had nutrient deficiencies. I had been anemic since I was 15. And that's just the way the water was, right? Like that's just the temp of the water. That's how I lived.
Yeah.
And I had difficulty getting pregnant with my first child. I made up for that by having 4, but I just wasn't right. And at the end of my second pregnancy, my husband was already working for a local functional medicine doctor. And he said, well, it's always about practicalities. Our insurance is changing. So before it changes, why don't you go have a consult with my mentor? I was like, okay. And really by the time I had my second kid, I only got out of bed because I had to. I didn't get out of bed because I was like, woohoo day. I was like, oh God.
Yeah.
And that was every day.
Awful.
It was awful. I felt awful. And I had hair loss and brain fog and anxiety and thyroid dysfunction and heart palpitations and asthma. And that irritable bowel was still there. And I had mineral nutrient deficiencies up the wazoo. I had that fertility stuff and I hurt. Like every time I got out of bed, I was 35 years old and I got out of bed, like I was like creaky and had to walk it off and my feet hurt. And I'm slim. I was skinny. Like, I don't know, 15 pounds lighter than I am now.
Wow.
And because it had all occurred so subtly, it wasn't like on Monday I was great and on Friday I stank. It was like, the slow decline over 10 years. I didn't really remember what it was like to feel great. And this is just how I felt. So I went and saw that functional medicine doctor and I was 35 and he did this, what I considered at the time, I was like, God, this is a crazy workup. Cause I was a traditional doctor. I did a CBC and a Chem7 and maybe your cholesterol every couple of years and TSH. I did 4 things. He did head to toe, everything.
Yeah.
And I did stool and food sensitivities and blood work and cortisol testing. And he also tested me for celiac, which I didn't know. And I got diagnosed with celiac when I was 35. And it turns out it's genetic.
Yeah.
And my dad has it, but I was never tested. And I didn't know it was genetic. I didn't know anything about it till I got diagnosed with it. And so that was 35. And then let me stop there because I'm assuming you have questions and then we can go into the rest.
I find it fascinating because, and this has happened, you're not the only one, but like, I find it fascinating that you're a medical doctor, you're trained gynecologist, and then you go to the functional medicine doctor and you are shocked at the crazy workup. So it makes me feel for people, and I'm a nurse and I have a medical background. I'm certainly not a doctor, but I know my body really well. And I know enough to be dangerous is what I say. But for the people that don't have any medical background and just don't know what tests to ask for, I struggle with, it's just when something's not right with your body and you go and see a traditional doctor, which again, like, I'm not saying that there's not a place for all of those tests that traditional medicine teaches, but when you know more and you know that there's so many more tests out there and so many things in your body that could be wrong, which we're going to get into when we start talking about mold toxicity and vitamin deficiencies and all of those things, it just saddens me in a way that like we live in this world where we don't have easy access to those tests.
And it gets even worse, Crissy, because think about it. If you had come to me and said, and in my traditional OBGYN practice and said, hey, I want you to test my gut, I would have ordered a Quest, OVA, and parasites test, right? I would have checked for some kind of infection, flagrant infection. And so I think the first thing to distinguish is really mainstream medicine does not have the tools we're looking for. If you need to deliver a baby, if you need surgery, if you have an emergency, you belong in the traditional system.
Yeah.
You really do. That's the place. But I actually should even back up a step. I didn't at the time hold the belief and the like in my heart belief that we as humans are meant to be vital, vibrant, healthy, able and interested in intimacy until we're at least 100, and that every decade gets better and better. I didn't hold that as the way life should be. I'm very reluctant to say the word should most of the time because we as women are like, I should work out more. I should eat better. I should get more sleep. It lives like, the 1,000-pound weight on our head telling us we're not good enough. So except in this case, we really should be that.
Yes.
And I didn't know that or think about that. And so I had no insight into that I was so sick because I didn't hold the belief that I was meant to be vital, vibrant. I was like, well, it's just the way I am. Yeah. I'm just frail.
Yeah. Right. You just start
BS,
to accept it.
Mm-hmm. But that's just how I thought I was, because it had also just this slow decline. And that's just the way my life was.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of layers to this, right? So you can't
the slow decline between 25 and 35.
Right. But I was like, wow, I went to med school in that time. I did residency in that time. I had 2 kids in that time. It was brutal. Yeah. Man, it was brutal during that time. But so I just figured, okay, I knew I had adrenal dysfunction because I had night sweats and I was shaky, like, my hands shook and I had anxiety. So I knew that something wasn't right, but I just kind of thought it was because I was in a really high stress environment. Yeah. And apparently being up for 36 hours is not what I'm constitutionally created to do. I stink at it. That's not good. So, but you can't go to the mainstream people and say, hey, do a full functional medicine workup, because literally I was not trained in this in med school.
Right.
I was trained in the medication approach and how to recognize emergencies and how to do surgery, right? So the mainstream approach, I was expert at mainstream, but those are the tools I had. So if you're looking for someone, you want to look for someone who says, I'm a functional medicine provider, and ideally a senior functional medicine provider, and what I mean by that is someone who's comfortable looking at your mycotoxins, your environmental toxins, your heavy metals, because it's like phase 1 and phase 2. If you're only looking at the gut, the adrenals, the minerals, nutrients, endocrine system, and you don't look at the toxins, it's like a half workup.
Yeah.
You can't do the toxins first, but you have to look at them.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because having seen a functional medicine doctor myself, I am very familiar with the workups and everything that gets done. But people ask me a lot of questions because I'm gluten-free, I'm dairy-free. I used to be asthmatic. I'm not anymore. I used to have reflux, GERD. I don't have that anymore. Like, there's so many things that I feel like I can say I used to have that I don't take on as having them anymore, because going through this functional medicine journey helped me so much. So people ask me, like, well, what is it? What is functional medicine? And what does it mean? And what are they testing? So let's talk a little bit about, and maybe we can tie it even into your story of how you found some of the things that were going on with you. But like, when you go to see a functional medicine doctor, why is it different than going to a medical doctor? Because of the first things that they start testing and that sort of thing. Yeah,
I would say I'm going to speak for for my practice, not all functional medicine practitioners, because excuse me, our practice is called 5 Journeys, and we named it that because there are 5 unique pillars of health, and and they're all intertwined. It's not like there's literally 5 pillars and they're disconnected. Sure. They're all like a big ball of wax. So there's your physical body, that's your bones, muscles, ligaments, posture, exercise. The posture you're in can act. Everyone always sits up when I say posture. Did you see me do it? I did. I was like, oh, she sits up. Everyone sits up when I say posture. But think about it. Amy Cuddy's done this seminal research on if you hunch over in your space Your cortisol goes up and your testosterone goes down, and you are viewed less powerfully.
Wow.
Contrast
Crazy.
that. If you get your shoulders back, your head up, take up space. And a lot of women, as women, we're like, I don't want to bother you. Don't, sorry, I didn't mean to invade your space. No, invade their space. Be big.
Yeah.
Right? Stop apologizing for your space. Take up the space. Your cortisol goes down. Your testosterone goes up. You are viewed more powerfully. Take up space. Be big. So that's your physical journey to health. Okay. And then there's the chemistry, which functional medicine doctors think of, which most people think of when they think of functional medicine, is the chemistry. Your minerals, your nutrients, your hormones, your full endocrine system, your digestion, your food sensitivities, your toxins, your gut, all of that is what's happening in the chemical realm. So when you do a functional medicine evaluation, you're often focusing on the chemistry. That's what's happening in there. Too much or too little. Figure it out. Then there's your emotional journey. That's your relationship to yourself, especially as women. We are so hard on ourselves. We would literally never say the things to others that we say to ourselves. Like, you're so stupid. You're such a failure. You always screw it up. How could you do that? No one would ever love you. You're so unworthy. You're not good enough. It's all in the realm of like beating ourselves down. Yeah. So I'm a huge proponent of altering the language. How can we transform the way we speak to ourselves so that it's not this constant, unremitting monsoon of negativity that brings us down, right? Like, so my children aren't allowed to say, I can't do that. I drive them nuts. I'm like, you can't do that. You can't say that. You're not allowed to say that. We don't speak that way in our house. And they're like, okay, I can't do that yet. I'm like, okay, fine.
Oh, yes. I love it. The growth mindset. Mm-hmm.
Tag a yet onto that. Tag a yet on. And, or like, hey, I'm practicing. I'm a work in progress, right?
Absolutely.
Or, the thing that I always say to the patients in my practice, the women who come see me, is like, look, I don't know a single woman who doesn't have too much on her plate. Let's say it in the positive. Every single woman has too much on her plate.
Yeah.
Especially today, there's so many demands. And so really the response to when things don't go the way you'd like them to go is, I really have too much on my plate. I need extra help. Yeah. That's the response, not you're such a screw up, or the other words we might use that I'm not going to use on national podcasting.
Right. Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Okay. So that's the chemical. That's the emotional journey, working on being kind to yourself. Then there's the social journey. Do you have a community? Are you part of a tribe? Do you feel like you belong? Dan Buettner looked at the areas in the world that have longevity. They routinely live to 100. And what they found is people have community. They have their people. So being isolated and not having your people is a negative factor for your health. And so ensuring that even if you're an avid knitter or an avid reader, that you get into a club. Like, I was just thinking, I'd love to get into a gardening club because I'm an avid gardener. We've converted our entire yard into an edible landscape. It's permaculture. Wow. We have the tiniest piece of land and it's all edible or beautiful or regenerative. So, and we have all of the pollinators in our yard. I've counted like 15 different species on any given day. So, but then I was like, oh God, that means I have to go to another meeting. So then I didn't. But so having a social world that moves, touches, and inspires you, makes you feel connected is critical. And then the last is, why are you here? What's your purpose? We call it the spiritual, which could be religious or not. Yeah. It's like, why are you here in this world? Yeah. Okay. So you put those together and you think, okay, it's an odd number. Usually people need to work on 3 things to tilt the scales towards health and vitality instead of degeneration, because left to our own devices, we will decline if we're not working on it. Okay. I've lost track of what that question is that I was answering.
First of all, I love that you explained all those because they're wonderful. I was asking sort of, when you go to a functional medicine doctor, what's different? And those 5 things are very different, because most of the time when you're going to just a traditional medical doctor, it's just about your physical body.
Right. Are you breathing? Are you breathing?
Are you breathing? How are your vitals? Did you do your mammogram? Yeah, exactly. It's like the same questions. So, and I understand that the saliva test, the stool test, the urine test, that all of these things that functional medicine tests but not everyone else does. So
Right.
maybe just explaining a little bit about, why it's this holistic approach, but what is actually being tested? Like what is being tested in your gut? How do you find mold toxicity? Because traditional medicine is not finding that.
Okay, sure. So again, it starts with that philosophy that you're meant to be vital and vibrant. And we're looking for, if you boil functional medicine down, either you have too much of something that's harming you, think toxins, food sensitivities, lifestyle, or you have too little of something that you need, think sleep, rest, rejuvenation, minerals, nutrients.
Yeah.
That's kind of it, right? So what we're doing is you can't, in medicine, it's so funny. I was trained that you have one problem.
Yes.
And really, that's not true. You have probably a lot of challenges in your body. And yes, they're all connected. But what we're looking for, because just like, remember that movie WALL-E? Are your kids old enough to have watched WALL-E, where there's Eva? It was the robot.
Yeah.
Cleaning the earth, and the robot whose arms came apart and her head came off. Like, we're not like that. You can't be like, oh, I have headaches, so it's a brain problem. No, it's a body problem. So the functional medicine approach says, look, your body is meant to be essentially like a high performance car. And so we need to understand what systems are functioning optimally and which systems are not functioning optimally. So when we talk about the testing, I'll call it the basic workup, but the entry workup, the foundational workup is looking at your minerals, nutrients, hormones, digestion, food sensitivities. Most of that is blood, right?
Yeah.
Except for the food sensitivities, most of that you could get through your traditional doctor if they knew to order it or if they were thinking about it. It's a bigger panel. It's like the equivalent of about a quarter of a pint of blood. So if you were to donate blood, you donate more than it takes, but there's a lot of tubes. So people are like, there's a lot of blood. I'm like, I know it's not that much. It just looks like a lot. So that's one.
Exactly.
Don't freak out. I'm like, don't freak out. It's a lot of tubes, but it's not a lot of blood.
Right.
That's one. And then we're also looking at your adrenals. Your adrenal glands are these little glands, are part of your endocrine system. They're like walnuts. Everything's food and medicine. So, okay, we're going to go back to walnuts. They live over your kidneys and your back, and they're responsible for your ability to get up and go and run away. But they also run the show. So your adrenals will determine whether you'll sleep at night. They'll determine whether you have energy in the morning. They'll determine whether you digest your food or whether your liver does its detox, if you're in a state of fight, flight, or freeze, the adrenals are signaling the liver and the gut to say, well, guys, it really looks like we're in crisis mode here, folks. So why don't you focus on survival instead of the everyday behaviors? Okay. So your adrenals will tank you or make you.
Okay.
And it depends, and unfortunately, I get a lot of people in the chair across from the desks, in the consultation saying, it's not a lot of stress. I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's like the on-off switch. It's not like a modern light switch where you have gradations of light. No, it's on or it's off. Okay. So your adrenals are jacked up or they're not. And when they are on and they're thinking that they need to really perform and you need to run, it's a very primitive response. And there's gradations to how much cortisol you could pump out, but basically you're either putting out cortisol or you're not. Right. And so we look at that. We look at the function. Your gut runs your body. Even everyone thinks the brain runs the body. The brain is your secondary instrument to run the body. Your gut is the primary. And actually, I would even say your gut is like down the road. Your brain is like third or fourth, because I call it the trifecta between your adrenals, your liver, and your gut. That runs your body. And then your brain responds. So your gut could be imbalanced, inappropriate, like digesting. You could have inappropriate enzymes that throw off your hormones. You could have overgrowth of inappropriate bacteria. There's a lot of things going on in there, and they have clinical relevance. They can make you overweight. They can make you anxious. They can make you depressed. They can make you not sleep. They can make you crave certain sugary and carby foods. So what we're looking at is what's happening in your gut. And then we want to know about food sensitivities. It's not the holy grail. So it's not like I can knock on it and go, okay, yeah, it's 100%, but it gives me a good guidepost for what are you reacting to on paper? What's getting through the lining of your gut into your bloodstream that's causing a reaction? And it gives me a place to walk down the path, knowing that I'm probably going to find something if I go based on what I see.
Right. Yeah. And it's pretty amazing too, because obviously we live in a world of where some people have allergies, right? Or if you have celiac, you are obviously can't tolerate gluten. But there's this whole world of sensitivities where, over time, it's just causing, whether it's causing inflammation or it's causing certain symptoms in your body that you've just gotten used to living with. And I'm convinced that for me, it was dairy with asthma. And I mean, I've been asthmatic since I was a baby and my entire life. And in the last year and a half, I haven't had dairy. I'm off every steroid. I haven't had a chest cold since. I mean, it is literally like I am a completely different person, like 100%. Like I can't believe it. And I'm like living it. And so, but it just takes an experience like that to understand how impactful it's not a simple change. I mean, it is a change, in diet, but how a change like that can be, but it can be that much impactful when you go to a functional medicine doctor and you realize that you're deficient in a certain vitamin, or you have an overgrowth of, like you said, a certain bacteria, because just that simple change could be throwing off so much in your body.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Which is unbelievable.
It's so amazing. Happy your asthma's gone.
Yeah, I mean, I am too. And not only is my asthma gone, but I think it's my immune system is so much stronger because I'm off of, my inhaled steroid. And, I went through this, I think 2 winters now, like with not one chest cold, and that's unheard of. I mean, I'm usually sick all winter long. So knock on wood.
I mean, gluten, dairy, sugar, soy are like the top allergens, and then followed by the nuts. And eggs. I mean, there's a list of the top 8 allergens for a reason, right? But sugar does not make it onto the list of the top 8 allergens. It's not considered an allergen, but it is an inflammatory food. So I'd say the top inflammatory foods would be gluten, dairy, and sugar. And so eliminating both of them, your system's going to be like manna from heaven, happy.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, woohoo, thank you.
Yeah.
So, okay. So tell us a little bit more about your story, how, so you were diagnosed with celiac. So obviously you, I'm assuming, went gluten-free and started to feel better. But then how did you start finding out about all of these other things like the mold toxicity and, all of these other issues that might have been causing your fatigue or joint pain or anything else that you're experiencing?
Sure. So I got diagnosed at 35 and went gluten-free, like you said, just like that. And then spent the next 5 or so years untangling my gut, because celiac is the autoimmune response, the final autoimmune response, right? But when you talk about sensitivities, you have warning ahead of time. About 40% of the population has a gene for celiac. So this is where you can have sensitivity to gluten, not yet develop the autoimmune disease, but have a problem with gluten. You can be on the spectrum, like a celiac in training. So so having that imbalance in the gut and that challenge to the gut causes the gut to really have issues. And so I spent the next number of years untangling my gut, fixing the bacterial balance, fixing the candida overgrowth, changing around the way I eat. I did so many things because I still had irritable bowel. I was still excruciatingly sensitive to gluten, like I never ate out ever because I was so sick. So I really worked very hard on that. And then, that was 35. And then fast forward, I was doing pretty well. Fast forward to 48. I'm now perimenopausal. I don't have a lot of symptoms, but I'm perimenopausal. And we went on this amazing vacation to France. And we spent a week in France walking around. And the month after I came home, I gained, now not in France, but when I came home, I gained 9 pounds, developed this ridiculous rash on my face. Like, Crissy, I wanted to rip my face off. Like, it was at the corner of it was on my eyelids and right at my nose and under my chin. And I was always like, I couldn't keep my hands off my face. It was so unpleasant. And then I lost half the hair on my head too. So these 3 things, the terrible trifecta. And I'm like, of course, what does every woman think when they lose hair and gain weight? Thyroid. right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I checked my thyroid. It's really amazing. I had fixed my thyroid. My thyroid looks great. Okay. So then I check my hormones because I'm 48. And
Yeah. So it's menopause. I was going to say thyroid and menopause.
Right.
Yeah.
I check my hormones. They are perfect. This is good news and bad news, right? I was like, they're perfect, but now what's the problem? Right before I went to France, I actually did a mycotoxins test, which is a test for the toxins that mold puts out when it gets in your body. And I got the result when I came home, and I had 5 strains of mycotoxins in my body. Okay. Again, this is like the double genetic thing. Like I couldn't just have one. I had 5. 50% of buildings have had water damage. So statistically, you've been exposed. We've all been exposed.
Yeah.
Schools, homes, basements, work. I had a patient whose car was moldy.
My gosh.
Mold is in the environment. So, okay. But I was like, so I started treatment for the mycotoxins, but it didn't help my weight, my hair loss, or my skin. I was like, what on earth is going on here? So I then did a gut test, and my stool test looked fantastic, Crissy. I was like, this is not the stool test that I'm used to. And, at some point I was like, God, I look good. I was like, I look good, except I felt terrible. So, and I could distinguish that I felt terrible. So fast forward, I'm listening to NPR, and they're doing this report on how, it's about 3 months later, they're doing this report on how when Notre Dame burned, it released 500 tons of lead dust into the atmosphere. And the closer you were to Notre Dame, the more exposure you got. And the farther away, the less you got. And how all these Parisians had gotten a lead exposure.
Oh my gosh.
Guess what? Guess when I was in France? The week after Notre Dame burned. Right after Notre Dame burned. We actually had tickets to go. And then, of course, we couldn't go because the crews were repairing it. And I was like, I got a lead exposure. Now, we all got a lead exposure, but I was the one who got sick.
Exactly.
So I tested. Now, I have access to all this testing. So I frequently will just do tests because the reps will be like, oh, we have a free test. Do you want to try it? I'm like, sure.
Yeah.
So I always am doing testing. So I had done a metals test, a provoked metals test years before, and had a mildly positive lead level that I'm ashamed now to say I blew off. I was like, well, we treat over 8 and it's 9. So like, okay, I'll keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
Well, turns out there's 2 things. One, that meant that I was really pushing up against the boundaries of what my body could tolerate, A, and B, what you see when you do these provoked tests on the first or second go around is often the tip of the iceberg, because these toxins are so toxic for your body. You do not have them floating around your system. And the same problem that has you not be able to get rid of them has them not show up on testing as easily, because you're storing them in your bones, your fat, your organs, your brain. These are not hanging around. They're not like, It's not like you can brush it off. It's stored. So, okay. So I do this test and I get the 9 and I'm like, it's 9, whatever. I blow it off. And then I do this test again because I now know I've had an exposure, and my lead went from 9 to 12, which is a 25% increase. That's significant change. Yeah. That got my attention in light of losing my hair, having the rash, gaining the weight. And I was like, oh, okay. So I have both mycotoxins and metals. That stinks. But I got going, I started to treat. And then in the treatment, I did the testing for the environmental toxicants, which are gasoline fumes, nail polish, hence no nail polish because I was high for those, plastics, phthalates, flame retardants. It's this whole styrene, this whole list of things that we're exposed to every day, no matter where you live and who you are. Yeah. And I was positive for a slew of those. And I looked over at my husband with the report in my hand and I said, I am such a dirty girl. And then I said, oh, we're going to write that book, right? Because I'm the poster. I've been living this life since that exposure to functional medicine at 35. I've been living this life. I eat organic. I've gone years without eating a processed carb or sugar. Like I don't drink alcohol. I am so boring on paper, Crissy. Who would want to live like that? Like I do it.
You're doing everything right.
And yet. And so I thought, okay, if I've got this and I'm like a maniac for clean living, what does everyone else have? And no wonder there's this explosion in autoimmune disease and chronic disease and obesity and depression, because the toxins are stored in your fat. You can't lose weight because the fat is holding the toxin. Until you get rid of the toxin, you can't get rid of the weight. So we have all of these women who are like, I do everything white. Why can't I lose any weight?
Yeah.
That's because you're storing, you're a loyal repository for toxins that are messing you up. And they don't just make you fat, they make you unhealthy, and they make your brain not work, and they make you anxious, and they make you not sleep well, and they mess up your hormones.
Yeah.
And I could keep going, right? There is hope, and it's really challenging and can be overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and to piggyback on that too, it's my understanding and at least my experience that once you figure out what, mycotoxins you might have or metals are, stored in your body. And the good news on the other side of that, after you test, is that there are all these natural herbs and remedies that are available to, whether it's bind to those toxins and help, there are so many things available that are just not mainstream, right? They're not totally cuckoo, but they're herbs, there's vitamins, that are really shown that to work to help alleviate all of these things from your body. So it's not only about just finding out what's causing all of these symptoms for you. The good news is when you're working with a functional medicine doctor, you have the expertise to be able to say, okay, and here's all the things that you need to take. Here's how you need to take them to sort of cleanse and heal your body.
Yeah, I mean, this is where my plug is work with a provider. That's why I, at the beginning, said a senior functional medicine provider, because how we work in our practice is we bring in physicians who are new to practicing functional medicine. They're not doing the toxins in the first 2 years of their practice because you need to do the foundational work, which is your food, your minerals, nutrients, your hormones, your gut, your adrenals, which is part of your endocrine and your hormones. Yeah. So that's the foundation of and the other foundation that you can't step over is your sleep, your movement, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with others. Occasionally I'll have someone who has a really toxic marriage or job, and I'm like, I can't help you till you fix that. Because you can take the best supplements in the world, but if you're just completely tanking the system, it's not going to work. So you have to look at the whole body, but this is the plug for work with someone because you want to target your treatment. And for example, when you get the testing and it shows you have heavy metal and you have mycotoxins and you have environmental toxins and you have pesticides, most people get analysis paralysis. They're like, oh my God, what am I going to do?
Yeah. And
you're never going to be quote unquote done, right? Because I'm actually due to retest my mycotoxins. I think it's been like a year or so since I tested, and it's a pub crawl. It's not it's not a sprint. It is a long slog because it takes a long time. But the nice thing about all of the treatments that we give is that they do synergize and they do overlap. Like chlorella will help you with mycotoxins and metals and the environmental toxins, and fiber will help with your gut and the metals and the mycotoxins, and glutathione will help with everything. Like there's things you can do. But again, you want to what are you treating and how much is it? You really want to get data before, don't just go out. I mean, sure. If you're a cilantro person, sure, eat it every day. It's going to be helpful, right? Food is medicine. Right. But if you're really specifically, I would say if you feel like you've been gaslit or you really know something's not right, or you can't lose weight no matter what you do, that's when you want to say, okay, I'm going to work with someone. Certainly eat healthfully and don't eat processed food, avoid sugar, minimize alcohol, get enough rest. Those are all things you can do yourself. We all need more sleep.
Right.
No question.
Yes. We all are not getting 8 hours, no matter how hard you try.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about Dirty Girl, which is
Dirty Girl. So
for all those listeners, it's a book.
There's two components to Dirty Girl. So Dirty Girl is a movement. Okay.
Oh, I like it. Yes.
It's the Dirty Girl movement to clean up our act.
Okay.
And the book is the roadmap for how you're going to do that. And the Dirty Girl Detox website gives you a program to do. We have an 8-week Feel Freaking Amazing program that's live, meaning it's not do it yourself. You can do it yourself. But if you've gotten this far and you're kind of up against it, you want to be in a community of people who are like-minded. So we have that program. We have supplements that help you balance your hormones and support detox because they go together, right? If your gut's messed up, your hormones will be messed up, your detox is messed up. It's all, again, you're not Eva in Wall-E. We're all we're all one. And so the movement for cleaning up our act is the Dirty Girl Detox movement. And the book is really meant to guide you through what are the things you can do on your own to clean up your house, your life, your environment, your thoughts, all of it. That's the foundational work that you can do. Like you have the keys to the kingdom here.
Yeah.
And then the next book next year, the Sweaty and Bitchy book, which is, it feels like I only write about myself because, the first was my mess and the second was I hit the skids. And I said to my husband, I'll just divert 1 second, Crissy.
I love it.
I was sitting in the car a couple of summers ago and, the car wasn't on. All of my kids are in the car. It's hot. The sun is baking me. And the car's not on. And I don't know where my husband is, but I'm literally like dripping sweat. I'm having the worst hot flash in the world. He pokes his head in the car. I don't remember what he asked me. To this day, I have no idea what he asked me. And I looked at him like The Exorcist, my head kind of swiveled. And I went, so imagine I'm like looking this way and I went, do you value your life? Turn on the car. And it must have been like, I really must have looked a little bit insane because he was like, okay, dear, got in the car, turned it on. I jack up the air. And then I looked at him and I said, I am so sweaty and bitchy. This is awful. And you go, and that's the next book we're going to write.
And there it is.
There we go. So I promise they're not all about me, but I seem to have a lot of messes that we need to write about because it is possible to navigate the perimenopause with grace and power and clarity and sleep and not lose your mind, your marriage and your job, from how much it could throw you off the cliff.
Yeah. Well, any book that's called Sweaty and Bitchy, I need to read along with Dirty Girl as well.
2024.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to have you back next season. Yeah. This time we talk dirty. Next time we're talking sweaty and bitchy because I think, that's a whole nother podcast episode to talk about that. So, all right. Well, that's amazing. I know that people can find you at 5 Journeys, right? 5 Journeys is your Instagram website, right?
It's kind of both. So we've been talking about this. The clinic, the brick and mortar is 5 Journeys, and that's Instagram, Facebook, and the website.
Awesome.
And then there's the national brand, which is like, how do you get involved? How do you join the movement if you're not in Massachusetts? That's the Dirty Girl Detox brand.
Awesome.
And so that's Detox. And that's on Facebook and Instagram. And then there's my brand where I'd love to connect with people, which is Wendie Trubow, MD. And that's on all the channels, all the social channels. So be in touch with me. I'm always like, oh yeah, what are you up to? Right?
Yeah, no, I love it. So we're going to link all of those in the show notes. So guys, if you want to connect with Wendie through any of her channels, you can find them all in the show notes. And I just want to thank you so much for being here today. I know that I learned so much. I loved hearing about your journey. I love all of the work that you're doing and the five journeys and the pillars. I think, really just looking at the whole person through functional medicine is, I think, where medicine is moving towards, because, like you said, it's not just about fixing one thing. We are a whole person and we need to be looked at that way and treated that way. So thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
My pleasure, Crissy. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Be sure to drop us a review. We would love to hear what you have to say about the episode, and be sure to connect with Wendie on her social platforms. And until next time, we will talk to you next week.